Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're actually going to discuss books I want to reread in 2021. I love rereading books. I kind of have an issue with it at the same time, like it's a very 50-50 experience for me. Sometimes I'll reread books that I remember absolutely loving and then not enjoy them as much and kind of put a dampener on my original reading experience, which kind of sucks. But there's other times where I reread books and I fall in love with reading all over again. So I compiled a list of books I really want to reread in 2021. Some are in preparation for series and books that are coming out in part of that series later on in the year that I just want to refresh my mind. Some books I want to reread because I remember loving and want to kind of remember what they were about. And then we just have a whole mix of things in here. So without further ado, let's hop straight into it. First on my list, we're going in no particular order. First on my list is Such a Fun Age by Kiley Reid. I read this book originally last year and I did enjoy it. I gave it a 4 stars. However, although I did enjoy it, I feel like rereading it I could get a lot more out of this book than I originally did when I first read it back in 2020, last year. This book, if you didn't know, is about a babysitter called Amira. And she looks after a little girl in a kind of more posh area of town, and one day the people that Amira works for calls her up really late at night. Amira is heading off to a party and was like, I really need you to take, what's the little girl called? Can't remember what the little girl was called, but to take this little girl out of the house and keep her occupied for a bit while we deal with some like house issues. So Amira takes the little girl to the local supermarket, and in the supermarket, she gets accused of kidnapping the white girl because Amira is black. And there's a lot of performative allyship in this book with Alex, who is the little girl's mum, as well as a few other her friends. Think they're doing the right, but actually they're making the whole situation worse. And it's just a really impactful book, and I enjoyed it, but I don't think I got as much out of it as I did when I first read it, so I want to reread it this year. I have listened to Own Voices reviewers and I just think rereading it would benefit me massively. So this is on my list for 2021 to reread. Next on my list is Half a World Away by Mike Gale. This, when I first picked it up, I literally picked it up for a readathon prompt to read a book with her house on the cover, not really knowing much about it at all. And I remember reading it and enjoying it, but feeling like the book dragged on a little bit. But the more I've sat with reading it, the more I've thought about my experience reading it, the more I remember enjoying it. When I first finished the book, I gave it a mediocre 3 stars, thought it was great, nothing special. But clearly this book left more of an impact on me than I originally thought, because I can't stop thinking about it and it keeps staring at me on my bookshelves. I really, really want to reread this because I feel like this could get a higher rating the second time round reading it. So if you didn't know, this book follows Kerry and Noah, and they don't know each other exists, but they are actually related. They just got split up when they were young. Noah got adopted into a more privileged family, while Kerry was looked after by her mother, who was really struggling, and Kerry basically had to look after herself. So they've come from 2 different walks of life, and they finally like find their way back to each other. And I enjoyed this book. I don't know, for some reason I keep thinking back to it and remember enjoying it more than I did when I was reading it. Is that even possible? I don't know, but I'm intrigued to reread this, maybe with completely fresh eyes, and just give it another shot, and probably most likely give it a 4 stars maybe, rather than like a mediocre 3. Really want to pick this one up soon as a reread. It's just I've been drawn to it like a lot recently, and I just want to reread it, so it's made my list. Next on my list is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. I read this book a good few years ago now. Remember absolutely loving it. I gave it a 5 stars, but I can't remember anything about it. So I want to reread it. And this is where my rereads kind of become a little bit apprehensive, because I remember absolutely loving it. I rated it 5 stars, but I'm scared to reread it in case it doesn't live up to my brain's expectation of it. But this book is really quite a serious topic-based book. I know it hits some physical abuse in this from a father to a son. That's all I can really remember about it. I'm going to quickly read the back because I think it will give me more motivation to read it. But I do really want to reread this book this year. When Adam Blake lands the best elective ever in his senior year, serving as an aide to the school psychiatrist, he thinks he's made it. Sure, it means a lot of sitting around, which isn't easy for a guy with ADHD. Completely blanked on that. That's great rep. but he can't complain since he gets to spend a period texting all his friends. Then a doctor asks him to track down a troubled freshman who keeps dodging her, and Adam discovers the boy is Julian, the foster brother he hasn't seen in 5 years. Adam is ecstatic to be reunited. At first, Julian seems like the boy he once knew. He's still kind-hearted, he still writes stories and loves picture books meant for little kids. But as they spend more time together, Adam realises that Julian is keeping secrets, like where he hides during the middle of the day and what's really going on inside his house. Adam is determined to help him, but his involvement could cost both their boys' lives. I remember a kid in a box, and I'm assuming it's Julian from the blurb. I think that's actually a massive spoiler, but I'm just being real with you guys. I'm really, really excited to reread this. I remember, obviously, like I said, loving it and giving it 5 stars. Hope to get to this reread soon. We've only got a few more, so I'm hoping my battery lasts while we talk about them. Fingers crossed. The next one I want to reread is Birthday by Meredith Russo. This hit my top 10 books of 2020 list last year. Absolutely adored this book. But once again, like The List of Cages, it's one of those books that I remember absolutely loving, but I can't remember all the small details that made me enjoy the book so much. So I want to reread it, and hopefully I will reread it with some of my booktube friends, which is really exciting. And I loved it so much, and I want to remember every single little detail, which I can't pinpoint at the minute, having it been almost over a year since I read it for the first time. It was like my first book I read in January of last year. So it's time for a reread. So that's going on my list for rereads of 2021. The last physical book I want to reread, and hopefully I'm going to get to it in January. Fingers crossed, when you see this video, hopefully I'm actually physically reading it. And that's The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. Literally just because The Mask Falling is out very, very soon, which is the 4th book in the series. And when it comes to The Bone Season, which isn't my typical genre, which is like dystopian, fantasy, sci-fi, it's a whole mix of things. I can't even really describe it very well. I have to enjoy The Mask Falling. I feel like it would benefit me to reread the first 3 books and just take every single bit of information from the first 3 books, so I'm not completely lost in a fantasy world that is not my like typical genre when I head into The Mask Falling. No matter how excited I am for The Mask Falling, I know rereading the first 3 books will benefit me greatly. I love this series. This is one of the first fantasy series I ever picked up. The blurb sounded interesting, hadn't heard anyone speak about it, so I picked it up off of like The Works or something really cheap like that. And I flew through this book. Back when I didn't read very quickly and it took me about 2 weeks to read a book, I read this book in like 4 days, and it's a chunker. So I just absolutely adore this book. I love the characters so much. This series is absolutely brilliant, and I cannot wait for The Mask Falling, but I'm gonna read the first 3 books before I get to that book for sure. This book is basically about Paige, who's a clairvoyant, and clairvoyancy are illegal in this world. So she has to kind of disguise herself, and she works as this like underground team, probably not a team, underground like group, who is led by Jackson Hall, and I don't know much more about that. She gets kidnapped and taken to a whole different world that she thought didn't exist anymore. She was taught in history in school. There's other people better explaining this book than me, but it's a massive book on BookTube. I'm sure you know of it. I want to read The Bone Season. Hopefully I'm reading it as you're watching this video. And then the last couple of books I want to reread this year are ebooks that are on my iBooks account that I read like way back in 2014. The first book is The Breaking series by Tracie Puckett. I read this book way long time ago, like 7 years now. 2014, yeah, 7 years, Jesus Christ. I remember absolutely flying through all 3 books in this trilogy. I can't remember what it's about. I've got the synopsis on Goodreads up on my phone. I think it's more like a new adult book, which is very peculiar because 7 years ago, I was only just hitting like 16 years old. Whoa, the sun has just come out. I just remember absolutely loving this series, not remembering anything at all, so hoping I still love it when I reread it. This book basically follows a girl called Mandy, and the synopsis is, sometimes the lessons of childhood are damaging enough that by 18 you figured out some rules you don't like to repeat your parents' mistakes. For Mandy, that means finishing her last year of high school, going to college, and then returning to the small town Schurig to live a solitary life as a writer. That was the plan, and her main rule for avoiding complications and staying on track was to never ever let someone get too close. That was before she met Gabe. Oh my god, I remember Gabe. Oh, okay. And when Gabe starts to awaken emotions he's never experienced, Mandy suddenly begins to question every belief she ever had. She can't be falling in love, can she? That would be the biggest mistake of her life, wouldn't it? Could she break one of the most important rules for Gabe? So this is a very much like new adult romance, high school drama-y book. I just had a really, really fun time reading it. Oh, I had left a review. Oh, this is a trip down memory lane. This is, I'm speaking quickly because my camera keeps flashing at me. A one-day read, the perfect romance book with a twist at the end. Very entertaining and quick read. Recommend to anybody, especially if you've just picked up a big complex book. This is perfect read to relax you. Saying that, I think The Bone Season was the book I read before reading this. I love that book. I gave it 4 stars back in 2014. And then the last book I want to reread is another iBooks series that I read back in 2014 as well, and that is the 3 Girls and the Baby series by Rachel Schurig. I think that's actually what the series is called. The first book is 3 Girls and a Baby, and then you have 3 Girls and a Wedding, then you have 3 Girls and something else, and then you have 3 Girls and a New Beginning, and then you have like The Truth About Ever After as like the wrap-up book. There's 5 books in this series, and I read all of them, and I absolutely loved the series. And basically, if you couldn't tell by the titles, it's about 3 best friends who live together from the first book, 3 Girls and a Baby, and the main character who we follow, because each book follows a different character. So our first book, I can't remember their names at all, to be fair. This is a great video, Rachel. Yeah, you follow, I remember the first scene being in the first book, 3 Girls and a Baby, being the main character of this particular book finds out she's pregnant, and then she tells her friends, and they kind of go through it all together because the boyfriend isn't in the picture. I gave it 5 stars, so an even higher rating than the Breaking series by Tracie Puckett. So I just remember absolutely loving this book, so I'm going to read the entire series this year, hopefully, and just kind of relive a really fun time of my life where I just read for fun. I hadn't really discovered BookTube in its extent back in 2014. I literally just read what sounded interesting to me and what I wanted to pick up, and I seem to have picked really good books back then. So I'm hoping my 2014-year-old self, how old was I? 14, 16, 17, 18. I was 18. Okay, not as young as I thought I was. Who knows? I'm hoping that 18-year-old self doesn't let me down. Fingers crossed. I keep thinking I'm 21, that's why I think I'm younger than I am, but I'm actually turning 24 this year. Help me. I don't want to be 24 this year. So that's it. Those are all the books I'm planning to reread in 2021. Fingers crossed I can get to them all. The list isn't too long, so hopefully if I put a book a month on the TBR that I want to reread, we can get through the list pretty quickly. And yeah, what books are you planning on rereading this year? Do you reread books? Because I know a lot of people don't actually reread books. I just absolutely love the experience. Most of the time, sometimes books can be a disappointment the second time you read them, but fingers crossed for all these books being smashing just like they were the first time I read them. And without further ado, I will see you in my next video. If you like this video, make sure you give it a massive thumbs up, subscribe down below to see more content from me. Make sure you follow me on all my social media to keep up to date with my life and my reading and everything in between when I post videos, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.